Welcome in, episode number 47 of the St0ner Sports Radio podcast. Joining me once again is friend and co-host of the show this week, Zach Huffman at Zach_Huffman_ on Twitter. We will review everything that went on last week in college football. We'll preview where we're at for tomorrow's games and who's drinking all the Kool-Aid. You might be surprised who I picked this week, and then we'll visit the sports book where we are at 73% winning percentages, still winning your money, folks, with individual picks, both of us 16-6 on the year. Zach, how are we doing this fabulous Be Happy Friday?
I mean, we're doing good, and I mean, I guess both of us are a little nervous about what could happen tomorrow for our respective, college football teams. Oregon's got to play the biggest story in college football, Colorado. That's going to be tough watch, especially if Colorado gets going early. And then, I'm a little worried about Cincinnati. They have a good offense, but I think OU has a better offense, and I still think OU wins this thing by 3 tutties. But
yeah,
we're nervous.
Yeah. We'll definitely revisit those situations because I'm not particularly, I'm stoked, but I'm not like, yeah, you know what I'm saying. So I think we're kind of riding a little bit of the same train today. Let's go over some games last week, Zach, because we had some big ones. We had some surprises. We had some, kind of eyebrow raisers where the right team won, but it wasn't pretty. So let's get started with that. I'm going to start out with Georgia and South Carolina, right? Georgia goes into halftime down 14-3 to the Gamecocks. I mean, you were feeling pretty good about the fact that what you said is it was looking right. Spencer Sanders can lead this South Carolina team to a victory over Georgia. We said it when the possibility was there. That game was theirs for them to lose, and then they get shut out 2 straight quarters, and Georgia outscores them 21-0 to get the 24-14 win. What was your biggest takeaway from the Bulldogs' comeback victory at home?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I think Spencer Rattler, South Carolina, played fantastic football in the first half. And that's a really tough team to go against. The fact that you were winning and at halftime is insane. So congrats to South Carolina for being in that game, especially in the first half. But the biggest takeaway I had is that Kirby Smart is, I hate to say it, with Nick Saban still being alive, Kirby Smart might far and away be the best coach in college football. It was late, I think in the fourth quarter, um, when they had that fake, what was it, the fake punt? Yeah, they had a fake punt, um, and, they got it, but Kirby Smart had recognized that it was a fake and called a timeout right before the snap had actually occurred, so that got called back. And, George, if Kirby Smart hadn't had that play, Georgia loses that game. So I think that Kirby Smart was just making fantastic decisions. Obviously everyone was talking about his halftime speech where he said, we're going to have 6 possessions, that we're going to score on 4 of them. And that's exactly what they did, and they held their own on defense. I don't know what kind of adjustments they made at halftime. On the defensive side of the ball, but it started working because, they were just shutting Spencer Rattler out. They were closing every lane. I mean, it was a difficult second half for South Carolina, but they held their own.
Yeah, I mean, that first half, we were conversing, and I was like, could this happen? Could this be, because this was definitely the best team Georgia had played to this point, right? I mean, this was their first conference opponent. This was their, beginning of the SEC schedule for them, and it didn't look pretty in that first half, and I think that maybe, just maybe, the lights may have been a little bit too bright in that first half, and then once they got settled after, Kirby sat them down and said what he said, which was exactly what you just, reiterated was, hey, we're going to only have probably 6 more chances with the ball, and we got to make the most of them, and they did. They went 4 for 6 and got the job done. but definitely an entertaining game. Of course, a little painful to watch that South Carolina offense in that second half. But I think that what we saw from South Carolina was they're not going to be someone you're just going to be able to roll over in the SEC. This
Oh
is
yeah,
going to be a team that every game that they have, and you look at Clemson, it's still on their schedule towards the end of the season as well. That game is always a dandy, and we saw what happened last season. We could have that very well happen again this year. But I mean, I just think that was my biggest takeaway was South Carolina is definitely better than they were last year, and I think that as far as that being a loss and they're 1-2, and you look at those two losses, North Carolina and Georgia, they're not terrible losses. Those are
yeah,
losses you'll go to bed and go look. I mean, they're just more talented. UNC. We weren't ready for that. It's a tough game to have. For your first game of the year, and what happened. I think if you would have played Georgia when you played UNC and switched them, I think Georgia may have rolled over you in that opening week compared to having 2 weeks under your belt and being able to kind of have more of a flow with the offense. But overall, a decent game to watch, and the Bulldogs looked okay, but I don't think they look as
yeah.
indestructible as we may have thought coming into the year.
And I think that they whoever they play in the SEC championship probably ends up being Alabama, just because that's how it goes. I think Alabama has a real shot to beat them. But also, I want to say, good job, Shane Beamer. He's obviously turning the
Yeah,
program
yeah,
around really
yeah,
well.
absolutely.
Um, so shout out Shane Beamer, and shout out Spencer Rattler. I still think he's the best quarterback in the SEC.
I don't have anything wrong about that statement. I think he's definitely the most talented. I would think. Now, obviously, Carson Beck, threw for more yards than him in that game, but he didn't throw any touchdowns. So I mean, I think that's kind of what you kind of come away with was he threw for more yards, but Carson Beck didn't throw any touchdowns. So I mean, like
And
you know,
just think about like if Spencer Rattler was playing for Georgia. I mean, come
Yeah,
on,
they would.
like
Yeah, that team would be indestructible. That would have been
yeah,
that'd be a team you'd be looking at like, oh, that was the shoe in for a national title if everybody stays
yeah,
healthy. Um, Now this was a game that me and you were kind of like shocked that this was happening in front of our eyes because we just thought Florida State was just gonna just roll over Boston
yeah,
College, and they really had a tough time with the Eagles, who were wearing their red bandana uniforms and sporting that in support of 9/11 firefighter, in memoriam, all that stuff. So there was definitely some emotions. Outscored Florida State 13-0 in the fourth quarter. Florida State survives 31-29. And to be honest, I just don't think Florida State was really up for this game out in Boston College. I think that they literally took them lightly, and I think Boston College played the best game they have played thus far this season.
yeah. They showed that they're not a team to mess around with. They're seriously a team that could end up finishing top 25 if they, finish out with some wins. But Florida State does not look like they looked in week one against LSU. Obviously, they got a lot of hype after that game. Maybe that was just kind of a little bit of a fluke game. Maybe LSU just wasn't ready for that week. But outside of LSU, has Florida State really been that impressive? Sure, Travis Hunter or not Travis Hunter. Jordan Travis has been pretty impressive. But I mean, I was, before the season started, I was definitely kind of on the side of I don't think Florida State's really got all that. And I think, after week one against LSU, I was like, well, then maybe they do. And then I started believing that they were probably a playoff team. But now I'm thinking I'm back to my old ways and thinking that yeah, they got some talent. I don't think they have the schemes. I don't think they have the coaching necessarily. I don't think this team is playoff ready yet.
Yeah, I mean I mean, look, I will give every team in the world a chance to have 1 week where they don't look good, right? I think
Yeah,
I think that I think playing at that level, and I just think what I said was right. I think that they just were like, it's Boston College. Like we'll just walk in here and it'll just be 59-0, and it'll be business as usual. And I think Boston College, who really needed probably this win to solidify some life, and even though you only lose by two, I think that you really found your quarterback in Castellanos. I mean, you throw for 300 and 5 yards and a touchdown and a pick. I think that's a great sign for the Eagles as far as their offense having some life to it, and their defense played okay. I mean, look, nobody was thinking going into the fourth quarter this was a game, right? I mean, you go
Yeah.
back to what the score was heading into that final quarter, and you're talking about, 31-16. This is kind of what you expected, and I kind of expected Florida State to pile on two more scores, and then that would be it. But they didn't score at all in that fourth quarter, which is kind of concerning. But at the same time, like, I just think there was so much emotion that the Eagles were playing with, the uniforms, what it meant to them, the crowd was kind of more juiced than they probably, have been throughout this season thus far. And I think that really played a big part in it. But, look, Florida State got the job done. They're still undefeated. They're still a top three team in the country. And I don't think that's going to change unless they
Mhm.
drop one. And so I think that they've got themselves in a position where, like you said, if they end up being in the playoff, they might, easily lose in that first game. But it depends on who they play and depends on how they look the rest of the year. But I think this week they have a better chance of looking a lot better than they did last Saturday in the rain. Speaking of a team that didn't look good, but a team that I thought, and I think you agreed with me on this, if I do recall. The Texas Wyoming game was tied at 10 going into the fourth quarter, Zach. I mean, and I
Yeah.
told you, I mean, this
Embarrassing.
Wyoming team, they're not to be messed with. I mean, they really
Yeah.
are one of the better teams in the Mountain West, and I think people that are Mountain West fans are still kind of sleeping on the Cowboys. I don't think they should, because even though you had a game where Peasley doesn't play the whole game, right? I mean, he gets hurt. We kind of knew this was going to happen. The way he took shots against Texas Tech, I mean, it was just kind of a matter of time before he's on the sideline with a concussion. So in comes, you know, Evan Svoboda, and the offense for Wyoming didn't really look as good as it could have looked. But that's kind of expected when you have your backup come in and take some major snaps for a team like Wyoming
Yeah.
that's leaned on the play of Austin Peasley to this point. As for Texas, I think I think it's just a matter of time before the bottom falls off of here, right? I mean, this is a team where sure they're ranked in the top 5 right now, but I mean, can they beat Oklahoma right now? I'd say no. I think your Sooners are in a
I
great
would say
spot
no. Yeah.
to give them the first L of the year here in a couple weeks. Because you have to put up a better performance. I know they outscored Wyoming 21 to nothing in the fourth quarter, but it shouldn't have even been that close if you're talking about a team that going into this had beaten Alabama, and oh my god, like that looked so good at the time. We'll get to their game as well last week here in a minute, but as far as this game goes, Zach, what were your takeaways from Texas? I wouldn't say escaping, but pulling away there at the end after 3 grueling quarters of going against a very stubborn Cowboys of Wyoming.
Yeah. I think it reminds me a lot of OU's game against SMU. Just because, it shouldn't have been that close. And obviously, this Texas Wyoming game was much closer than the SMU OU game was. Obviously, like tied going into the fourth quarter. But I like the way that Texas responded in the fourth quarter to just pull away, do what they should have been doing the entire game. And I think Sark probably just kind of got the guys together and was like, listen, this is Wyoming. What are we doing? I'm pretty sure they were in Austin too. It's like,
Yep.
what are we doing?
Yeah, it
Like,
was a
what
home
are we
game.
doing?
Yeah.
So it's like we got to get our shit together. Let's get the offense flowing. Let's make sure we're making the smart plays on defense. Stop playing lazy because they were just playing so lazy those first 3 quarters. Um, and I think they did that. So I think that's a sign of a pretty good team. But I would agree with you that I don't think they can beat Oklahoma right now, just because OU's kind of firing on all cylinders right now. The only thing that's kind of a little bit still a little bit of a question is some of the defensive capabilities, like the secondary, still missing a couple of things. But other than that, this OU team's looking a lot better. So I think that game. What is it? I have the schedule here. October 7th. I mean,
Yeah, 2 weeks.
that, yeah, that's 2 weeks away. That's gonna be a tough one. I think that's gonna be a battle. But I think a lot of Texas fans and a lot of the media is kind of looking at this Alabama game thinking, Texas beat Alabama. Obviously, they should be a top, 2, top 3 program. Um, I would disagree with that. Let's think about last year, right? So Alabama beats Texas. What was it, 20-19, um, last year? And did I say Oklahoma? I meant Alabama. Alabama beat Texas 20-19,
Hmm.
and Texas, everyone was thinking Texas looks really good. Texas might be able to finish the season as, obviously Big 12 champion. They could go to the playoff even after, almost beating Bama. And then they finished the season, I think, what was it, 8-5
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
end
I
of the
mean,
year.
yeah, but that, and
Like,
Hudson Card played a lot of that season as well. That
yeah, and
he
that's fair.
he played in their loss to Texas Tech as well, and that was also something that happened afterwards. So that was kind of when the wheels kind of fell off. Then Quinn Ewers comes back and loses to Oklahoma State on the road and looks
Yeah,
terrible. And then at the end of the year, they kind of started picking back up, kind of where they left off. But I think right now this Texas team is definitely, like you said, it's not impressive right now to me. And we'll kind of expand on that here as we talk about Alabama, who they
yeah.
played South Florida down in Tampa Bay, and huge rain delay over like
Mm,
2 hours, I think, something like that. South Florida was up 3-0 at the end of the first quarter. It's tied at 3 heading into the half, and obviously no Milrow playing for Alabama. Nick Saban wanted to give Tyler Buckner and Simpson even came in eventually for this team. But neither of them looked good at all, Zach. And when you reflect back on the way Texas beat this, Alabama team, do you think that having Milrow in this game against South Florida would have changed things? I think it would have probably. I think he is the best
yeah,
quarterback on that roster. I think Nick Saban knew if we were going to test this theory, this was the game to do it because I think he felt like even if we have our backup quarterbacks in, we should still win this game. And obviously they end up outscoring South Florida. They don't score after that first quarter. They literally didn't. But literally, their quarterback, who only threw for 87 yards and a touchdown, had more passing yards than any other quarterback that played in this game. So, what that
yeah,
tells me is you have a team like Alabama who's got quarterback depth like OU had quarterback depth last year, where it's like, if Milrow is gone, I mean, you are screwed, brother. I mean, there is
yeah,
no help behind Milrow, and I think that was 100% what happened right there. Just unequivocally. And as far as Alabama looks right now, they don't look great, which reflects on Texas is not looking great. And I think right now things are kind of in place here for some of these teams that are on the outside of the playoff rankings right now, looking at a chance where. Man, maybe Alabama could lose 2 or 3 games this year. Man, Texas could lose 2 or 3 games like this year if they
yeah.
continue to play like they played this past weekend. Now, obviously, tons of
Hmm.
time for these narratives to change, but as far as I'm concerned, I think that these teams are not as good as we thought coming into the season, and I think that these games that we saw, even though they're wins and they're W's on your schedule when you haven't lost. I mean, Alabama has, but Texas hasn't lost. But I mean, these are games where it's like you have to look more impressive than that for me to sit back and go, that's a team that looks viable if it comes down to the last 4 teams that I would want, representing my conference or representing, you know, themselves in that situation.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think this upcoming weekend we're going to see a lot of things play out that I think are going to kind of forecast what's going to happen for conference championships, right? So I think depending on how Texas plays against Baylor this weekend, and depending on how OU plays against Cincinnati, I think we're going to get a pretty good look at who's probably going to win the Big 12, right? No matter what happens in the Red River game, because I think that if one, both teams blow out their opponents as they should, then I think we're looking at OU probably being better than
Well,
Texas
it
based
it,
on the
it
opponents they're playing.
and for Texas, Shapen is back for
Yeah,
Baylor, so I think that's a big thing for that offense. So that I was just throwing that out there because I know that if he had played against Utah, I think Baylor would have won that game probably.
yeah,
How considering how bad Utah looked. So this is
hmm,
going to be. I don't think you should even look at the tape of the Utah game if you're Texas. I think you just throw it out. I mean, you can look at it, but I'm saying like don't take the quarterback play into perspective because Shapen is way better than who they had throwing the ball last week for them. Or not
oh
last week,
yeah,
but the
a
week
hundred
before.
percent. And and then on the other side of things, I think that you look at this Alabama Ole Miss game, right? And Ole Miss wins this game against Alabama. I think we're going to end up probably seeing Ole Miss in this SEC championship game.
Yeah.
Um, So that's going to have a lot of playoff implications. That's going to have a lot of implications for our predictions. Before the season, I'm hoping, because of my prediction that Alabama finishes 11-1,
Yeah.
um, and loses only losing to Texas, which is okay. You're still going to be an SEC title game at that point.
Mhm.
But depending on how things look against Ole Miss, I mean they're in trouble. I mean they're really in trouble, and I think that Nick Saban might start to experience the possibility of a 3, 4, dare I say 5 loss season. I mean, like this, like
Oh, unheard of. since his
Like
first
that
year.
like seriously, like he's about to be in that situation where it's gonna start looking like, oh shit, Bob Stoops just went 8-4. Like, like
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
gonna start being in that situation.
The decline, yeah. Um,
So
yeah.
yeah,
That was definitely my takeaway from that game. Other two more teams that have playoff hopes still alive. Penn State, who was only up 16-7 against Illinois on the road, ends up beating the Illini 30-13. Looking okay. Quarterback doesn't throw any touchdowns, doesn't throw any picks, only throws for 200 yards. Your running game didn't exist because Illinois' running back only had 55 yards, led the way rushing in that game. So Penn State's offense not looking too great, Zach. It didn't look impressive enough to me. When Kansas beats Illinois worse than you beat Illinois, I don't care if you're on the road in Champaign. This Illinois team is not fantastic. I think that
yeah,
if you want to be Penn State, you want to be taken seriously as a contender, along with Michigan and Ohio State in this conference, you have to take care of business against teams like Illinois. Now, we've seen Illinois beat Ohio State in the past. We've seen them do some things, like Purdue's done some things. Some of these teams in the Big Ten, they have their moments. But I don't think this Illinois team is it. I don't think this Purdue team this year is it. I think right now you're looking at a very top-heavy Big Ten, and I think if you don't take care of these teams in impressive fashion, which 30-13 does not impress me, I think that you're that you're looking at possibly having trouble against teams like Ohio State and Michigan again this year if you're Penn State. I mean, as far as Ohio State goes, jury's kind of still out with them because I mean, even though you beat Western Kentucky 63-10 last week, you didn't really show me anything I didn't know. Mr. Kentucky's bad. Like what do you want me to tell you?
bad.
I mean, you were up 42-10 at halftime. I mean, it wasn't like you weren't in cruise control for the whole entire second half. I mean, it was not, what it should not have been. They looked probably the best out of any of these Big Ten teams because Michigan beat Bowling Green 31-6, but that didn't really impress me either. So I think,
Yeah,
right
like
here, you're
whatever.
looking at Ohio State having the most impressive week last week after kind of struggling the week before that and, looking, the same they did this week, the first week. I mean, I think that as far as there being separation between these three teams, it might not be as wide as we think. But I think right now, if there was a Big Ten representative in the college football playoff, I don't know if they're getting past who they're playing.
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree with that. And one thing I took away from this Penn State Illinois game in particular is I think the Penn State offense looked bad, but their defense still looked really good,
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
in my opinion. They Illinois get 6 points. They only scored 13 points. Illinois gets 6 of those in the fourth quarter. I think backups were starting to come in at that point. So,
mhm,
um, you know, I think Penn State still is a force to be reckoned with in the Big Ten, but I think they're going to have a hard time scoring against some of these tougher defenses going forward in conference play. Um, Now, speaking of Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten, this week is what we're really going to test. Is
yeah.
we're going to find out if Ohio State's good or not,
Now we'll get there.
and we're also going to find out if Notre Dame's good or not. I'm
Yeah,
hoping that this is a close game and a high-scoring close game,
we'll
so
talk about
that
that.
yeah, like
Um,
I'm hoping that they can just blow everything up in this game.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right. I think Penn State's defense definitely carries them. Now this was a game that me and you thought was a very big statement game for this team, and boy, did they really hammer that point home. Washington just creams Michigan State 41-7, and it wasn't even that close because those 7 points came in garbo time. I mean, this
Oh
was
yeah,
an absolute just shellacking. Michael Penix Jr. looks like a Heisman Trophy winner with 473 yards and 4 touchdowns, no picks. I mean, the guy has the most yards out of any Power 5 quarterback in the country right now with 1,375 yards. I mean, he's only thrown one pick thus far. I mean, if he doesn't run into some problems soon when he's facing some defenses, I think that he might just outperform Caleb Williams, who's also having a better year than he had last year statistically, and could
mhm.
very well be hoisting that trophy in December. What are your thoughts on Washington's just absolute shellacking on the road in East Lansing?
Um, they did what they were supposed to. Michigan State obviously is dealing with a lot of stuff right now, so maybe they were, kind of off the rocker a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty confident that Washington might be the team to beat in the Pac-12 going forward. I want to see what Oregon does against Colorado first, but Washington is looking nice, and I think that no matter what happens the rest of the season, Michael Penix Jr. is almost definitely going to be in New York City.
Yeah, I think he's well on his way. He just got to stay healthy. I think that's a big thing. Is
Stay healthy.
if he stays healthy, I think there's no doubt about it. And speaking of looking healthy and looking to save your season. Tennessee travels down to the swamp, Zach, and boy, we could have not been more wrong about this. Tennessee just lays an egg, my friend, and loses 29-16, and the woes on the road in the swamp continue for the Volunteers. Like, what happened? I mean, like, what went on to have this team just crumble the way they did against who me and you thought going in here was just an inferior opponent?
Yeah, I mean, I took the Tennessee to cover that huge spread too. I mean, like that was rough. Like that was rough. I mean, Tennessee looked bad, and I hate. You know, you obviously you're going down to the swamp. You know, it's Florida. It's tough to beat Florida down in the swamp. But geez, this is not a good Florida team. I mean, we were correct, and we are still correct in
Yeah,
our
yeah,
analysis that
yeah.
Florida is a worse team than Tennessee. Tennessee just played one of the worst games I've seen. Do I think they still have a chance to be in the SEC game? Sure. Just because like they can still beat people. They obviously just had a horrible game this week. I mean, I didn't. I have to look up the stats just to see how everyone played individually. But they were terrible. I
Yeah,
mean,
it wasn't
like there's
great.
no other way to put
It
it.
wasn't great. Yeah, I mean, but and the thing is Joe Milton didn't have a bad game. He threw for 287, two touchdowns and a pick. I mean, usually that stat line will get you W's.
Mhm.
If you're playing a team like Florida, I mean that's what you want your quarterback to have. But you can't allow a running back to have 172 yards. I mean, ETN just went. I mean, Trevor ETN just went buku bananas crazy, and you're starting to see this Tennessee defense not being able to defend the run, Zach. And this is the SEC. Teams are going to run the football, and if they if they teams can average 170 yards running the football against you, you ain't winning many games, brother.
Yeah, I mean that's really what we came to see from this Tennessee defense is that one, they can't defend the run. They're going to have a tough time against SEC opponents, especially like Georgia. So that's going to be a tough one. Do they play Georgia or Alabama this year?
I'm looking right now.
I
According
think it's
to their
Alabama. It should just be
according
Alabama.
to their schedule, they play Alabama and Georgia both this year. They play Alabama
Oh yeah,
October 21st and Georgia October 18th. So, or sorry,
they're
November
going to run the
18th.
ball down
Yeah,
Tennessee's throats. Like they're going to run the ball down their throats bad.
yeah.
Those two games. So
Yeah, so they got to fix that, and if they don't, they're in trouble. Another
yeah,
team that didn't look too good, and a team that we kind of put a lot of stake in, and I'm not, I really don't want to eat this crow, Zach. I mean, it's right. I don't want to eat it, but Missouri hits a
yeah.
61-yard field goal to beat Kansas State at home, and I just I don't want to hear it. I mean, I need Memphis to win this week, so I don't have to hear every
We need
single Missouri
Memphis to
person
win.
that I trashed on Twitter to just ream my absolute gaping bungus. I mean, because I mean, what I mean, is is Brady Cook the second best quarterback in the SEC? I mean, I mean, he could be.
Listen,
Is
Missouri looks
is
okay.
is Theo Weiss, the OU transfer, looking like one of the
Mhm.
best transfer wide receivers in the SEC? Yes. I mean,
Yes,
could
he
could
does,
could
he
Cam
does, and I
could
wish
Cam
we could have kept him.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, NIL's a bitch. I mean, what else can you say? And if OU had Theo Weiss on their roster, he'd be wide receiver 2 or easily wide receiver 3. And OU would look fantastic. But the point I'm getting at here is do we have to respect Missouri now? Or is this
Oh, we
more
don't have to respect.
or is this one of those things where Kansas State just crapped the bed and because of the rivalry? I mean, let's be honest. Missouri made T-shirts after this game. That's poverty program activity. You don't make T-shirts
It is
after a
poverty
regular
program
season
activity.
win on a record long field goal. You didn't win this game by being the better team. You won the game by having a kicker who's got two legs and one. I mean, I don't know if he. I mean, 61 yards for a college kicker is ridiculous. When they got that delay of game, I
Yeah,
was like, "Oh, we're going into overtime." I was like, get ready for OT because 61 yards, or like his career long was 57 or something. I'm like, 61 is a little bit longer than 57, and those 4 yards are going to look mighty long from 61. And boy, did he have room to spare. I mean, he could have hit that thing from 65. I mean, I was like, some NFL team's going to sign him. I mean, there's no way an NFL team doesn't sign that kid off of just that kick alone. They're going to be like, he's got the distance. I mean, that's with pads on. He's got the distance. I mean, I remember when Garrett Hartley for OU was hitting 75 yarders in warmups with no pads on, and
Well,
and
Gabe Burkich too.
yeah, just ridiculous. But I mean, just what happened to Kansas State? Is this just a fluke, or is this something that they need to be concerned about from now to the rest of the season?
Um, they do need to be concerned about the fact that they lost to fucking Missouri. I mean, geez, and I don't listen. I don't think we have to respect Missouri. Um, I don't think they're a good team. I still don't think they're a good team. I think Brady Cook's a good quarterback, and I think that they're a poverty program. I think they got a lucky win. Just Kansas State just played terribly. I mean, just terribly. And for the most portions of that game, Kansas State looked like obviously the better team. And then when it just came down to those moments, Missouri's just winning, taking over on the red zone, making the red zone efficiencies better, just doing what they need to do.
Well, in that
And
in that last drive they had too, they had to convert like 2 or 3 third downs. I mean, and you can't get them off the
yeah,
field. I mean, where is this Kansas State defense that I've been shaking in my boots? I mean, where is that? I used to carry this team. Now, I
seriously.
mean, I just don't know.
Yeah, the defense just wasn't looking like it should against Missouri. And credit Missouri a little
Yeah,
bit. They
yeah,
played well that game. They were playing great that game. I still don't respect them. The
yeah.
problem that the big problem that I had from that game is I'm with you. I didn't think he was making that kick before the delay of game, right? Like I'm like, oh, that's a long one. I was like, he got the distance, but like I don't know if he's gonna hit that. Like that's a long shot. If I'm Kansas State, I got a returner back there no matter what.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, let's get this thing going. Let's have a kick six. Let's do it. And the delay of game happened. I'm like, okay, overtime, OT. They're gonna kneel it out. Like most likely, probably just gonna kneel it
Yeah,
out. Let's
the
just
the
go to
most
OT.
Missouri thing to happen, a delay of game on
Yeah.
on a feel like I'm just like they're asking to lose. Like I was like they had this game, they're asking to lose. I mean,
Exactly. As soon as that delay of game happens, I'm like, there we go. Poverty program. That is a
yeah,
poverty
yeah, I
program
was
activity.
I
They had
was
a
I
delay of
was
game and the last second field goal. They just pushed it 5 yards further. And what the hell? He fucking made it. I
yeah,
mean,
they didn't
geez.
just
And
make
that
it. I
just,
mean, he
he,
he
s-
he
he
smoked
sliced
it.
that
He
bitch. He just
smoked it.
smoked that bitch. Like, just,
I mean,
oh, that looks
I
good.
I
And
kept
like, as
I
someone who loves kicking, that was just like, I'm a big fan of field goal
yeah,
kicking. I'm like,
yeah,
if you can kick it far and accurate, I love it.
yeah.
I don't know why. It's
I
just fun to watch.
I was
And
having
that was beautiful.
yeah, I was
And
having
watching
the
Kansas State, watching that K-State defender, you know, he's sitting there about to return it. And this is how I knew it was good the second I saw it because he just went,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It went over his head, and he was like, "It's over." Like
yeah,
he was like, "I'm not gonna get a chance to touch this thing." I was having Waterboy, you know, Klansman flashbacks from that dude just smoking that. I was like, I don't know what he was envisioning, but he kicked the shit out of it. I was like, he
yeah,
he destroyed it. I mean, he literally had like 4 yards to spare. It didn't eke over the thing. It didn't bounce off of the crossbar and go over. He had room to spare. Like he hit the net. Like it wasn't like, oh, like that's
might have been good from
like
70.
I was yeah with pads on. Like I mean like forget everything you know. I mean, and the man's like 280. Like the dude is a
He's
beefy
big.
boy. He's
Yeah.
a beefy kicker. I mean, all the props to him. Definitely was one of the most entertaining games of Saturday. Even if it didn't turn out the way we had hoped, it was definitely one that came down to the wire. One that was also great, double overtime. Colorado beats Colorado State. Um, and to be honest, Zach, I think this game, the biggest takeaway for me is Colorado State beat itself, right? You don't go for it on 4th and 2 after picking up 5 yard chunks every single play up to that point. I just thought Colorado State didn't have balls. I'm like, you're punting down by 7. Now, the punt went down to the 2 yard line. So, I mean, like, it was a great
Mhm.
decision to that point. Like, okay, 98 yards. Shadir Sanders, this is his moment. If they can get there, like, fantastic. And sure enough, what happened. And we're sitting here talking about an undefeated Colorado team. And boy, is that 7 or more wins looking pretty tasty to me right now. They,
Yeah.
they, they beat the teams they needed to beat. These 3 games that they had, They needed to go 3-0. They went 3-0. The biggest one I thought was going to be the TCU game to hurdle, and sure enough, that one was just as close as this game was. Which kind of surprised me. I thought they were going to have more of a Nebraska kind of effort against this team because I didn't really think Colorado State was that good, especially not having a win on their resume. But, rivalry games are crazy. And this kind of came down to, once again, why did you not go for it on 4th and 2? I get it. You don't get it. They have the ball on your side of the 50. But it's like, to me, the momentum was like, just hand it off. Like Colorado's defense couldn't stop them. Like, it was 3rd and 7. You pick up 5 yards right there. You're 2 yards short. And Coach Jay Norvell, who was just, wanting to smoke that Colorado pack all week long, decides to just cave. I just don't get it. I mean, I love Colorado. I wanted them to win, but in that moment, I was like, you go for it. You have to go for that. And it ended up costing them the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we had a little bit of I think a little bit disagreement when we were watching this game. I thought Colorado looked terrible. Um, at one, you're at home, right? And you're playing Colorado State, who's terrible, right? And your defense gives up 28 points, and you have to go to overtime,
Double overtime.
double overtime with Colorado State. That defense looked terrible. Travis Hunter wasn't in the game when he needed to be, obviously. Maybe that changes things a lot more, but they're looking real top heavy over there in Colorado, and I hate to say it because I want them to get to the 7 wins, but I'm not sure if they get there, even though they won these first 3, just because that defense looks like a huge liability, especially
It
with
does.
Travis Hunter
It
being
does.
out.
It does.
And,
But
like, I'm a little worried that they're just gonna fall short, and one, these big games, they're gonna fall short,
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
I just don't think they're gonna be able to beat Oregon. They're not gonna be able to beat USC. I just don't
They,
think that
I mean,
happens
they
after
need
what
to.
I saw.
I mean,
I know,
that's
but
an
it's like what I
11 a.m.
saw,
kick
that's just
against
not happening.
USC too. That's an 11 a.m. kick against USC. Like that, like at least for us, it's 11 a.m. But I mean, that's a 9 a.m. kick for them out on the West Coast.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah,
okay. It's in Boulder, so I mean, you got to think about that too. So technically, it's 10. It was at 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning.
yeah,
Um, but I mean, for those body clocks for USC players, that's 9 a.m. Of course, everyone's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. They wake up at 5:30 every morning to work out." I get it. But I mean, working out is different than having a game and having to actually like look at a playbook and make decisions like that. You're not just lifting weights. I mean, it's no offense. But
yeah,
I mean, I look at this schedule and take Colorado State for what it is, right? They lose to Washington State by 30, and then they barely lose to Colorado. What does that say about Washington State, who's now ranked? I mean, they're probably good. I mean, right? I mean, Washington State probably better than we thought coming into this season. I thought they were going to be trash. I think when we did our Pac-12 review, we thought that they were going to be in the bottom half of this conference, and here they are towards the top half. Does it last very long? I don't know. But their schedule has been very favorable thus far this week. Again, as a lot of these results hinge on this weekend. But you look at Colorado and you're like, okay, so you're 3-2 heading into Arizona State. You can probably get a win there at home against Arizona or on the road against Arizona State. That's 4. You can probably beat Stanford. That's 5. Probably going to lose to UCLA and Oregon State probably, and you have to beat Arizona, Washington State, or Utah to get to that 7 wins. And I think that they're going to have some luck here to get there. They definitely have the offensive talent to hang with these teams, right? It really hinges
mhm,
on if the defense can force turnovers because they can't really stop anybody traditionally. I don't think that unless they're playing Jeff Sims every week, which they're not, I don't think that we're going to have a situation where their defense is going to be just traditionally good enough to stop anybody. They're going to have to force turnovers if they're going to try to get stops defensively because that's kind of what it hinged on late. Now, granted, like I said, they did force that 4th and 2, but if I'm Jay Norvell, I'm going for that because they just couldn't stop you. And you have, Nicolosi throw for 367. I mean, come on, like give the kid a chance to, if it's not there, pull it and run for it because I don't think they're going to have a spy on him. I mean, they had a chance to win this game, and that speaks more about Colorado than it does about Colorado State, in my opinion, but it also speaks
oh
volumes
yeah,
about Jay Norvell just not having any balls. Like, I'm sorry, like, like Dion took your balls, put them in his mother's purse, and she took them home. I mean, it was just not a good look for someone who wanted to call out Dion before this game. If you're gonna do that, you got to back it up with something. And when it mattered most, he caved, and it ended up biting him.
Yeah, yeah. And, fuck that guy for that dirty hit on Travis Hunter.
I don't know if it was dirty. I
Oh,
mean,
come
it
on.
was.
It was so late, and it was obviously trying to injure his ribs. Come on.
I mean,
He went under, he went down and up into the rib cage, late and out of bounds.
yeah. I mean, yeah. That's. I mean, I just feel like the timing. I mean, death threats are a little bit much, but I mean,
Yeah,
like,
death threats are much, are way
I
too much.
mean, was
But
it? It was a little dirty. I don't think it was like huge dirty, but it was like a little
I don't
dirty.
think he was trying to hurt him. I think he was trying to shake him up a
Oh
lot.
yeah. Oh, he did though. Yeah, he shook him up. He shook them ribs
Shook him
up.
up,
Yeah.
put him in
Um.
the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a shake up. Um. And this is the last game I wanted to talk about. This was kind of the only one that kind of tickled my fancy. Um. Ohio beats Iowa State at home.
Hmm.
The laughable no good field goal that obviously was good had me dying. Because of the luck that Iowa State has had with other teams kicking field goals and them not being called good when they might be actually a decent kick. And I loved the interaction between the fan and Coach Matt Campbell. You're on the hot seat. You're on the hot seat, and Matt Campbell turned around and wanted to fight the dude. I was
Yeah,
dead. I was like, because he is. I mean, you can't lose to Ohio on the road if you're
yeah.
Iowa State. You have to win that game. I know you've lost a lot of players due to that gambling scandal, but you have to be able to pull that out because you're a Big 12 team. You should have more talent than a MAC team, especially a MAC team that only puts up 10 points in 4 quarters. You have to be better than that. What was your takeaway from the Bobcats getting a big win over the Cyclones? I say big win because I think it is for them.
It's a big win for them, and I just want to say, like, Iowa State's terrible. Matt Campbell's terrible when he doesn't have Brock
Is
Purdy.
he on the hot seat?
Um, he's definitely on the hot seat. Like, his ass is on fire right now. Like, he is on the hot seat. You lose to Ohio, come on. And like, if he wants to fight, sure, I guess. Like, come on. Like, you're on the hot seat. That's why you got so angry about the guy that said
You're on
that.
the hot seat.
And
Oh my god.
and and listen, one thing I want to say about the gambling thing is, do you think Brock Purdy might have been in on that gambling stuff before he left Iowa State? I think he could have been.
I
Just want to
mean,
throw that out there. For someone who thinks
I
that the 49ers should he should be disqualified from playing in the NFL before they win the NFC Championship over the Cowboys.
yeah, I mean, hey, I mean, you know how stuff happens. It comes out 10 years after it matters, and then the current program gets reprimanded for your problems. Ask Oklahoma State how that works out.
Yeah, they're going to
It,
find out that Brock Purdy was gambling. They're going to give Oklahoma State 10
yeah,
years of no
yeah. Oklahoma
playoffs.
State's quaking. They're like, oh, great, another postseason ban. Um, but speaking of the games this week, let's start out with your OU Sooners playing Cincinnati, and let's talk about Cincinnati.
Mhm.
You lose to Miami of Ohio at home. Not a good look for you. Emory Jones still throws for 265, no touchdowns and 2 picks. That's got to be cleaned up. If you're Cincinnati, you can't lose to Miami of Ohio at home. I mean, this is unacceptable if you're a Cincinnati fan, and I think any Cincinnati fan in their right mind will agree. But as we peer into the telescope into tomorrow's games, I mean, I don't think that OU should be looking at that loss and going, you know, that's how bad this team is, because I don't think that that's the case. And I think that if any team is looking to try to rebound hard, it's the Cincinnati team. OU's favored by 14 here. I mean, how do you think this game's going to pan out? Do you think that that spread is too low? Do you think it's too high? And do you think that that Cincinnati has a chance here to maybe expose this defense, or is this defense for real?
I think Emory Jones is going to expose the defense just a little bit, but I'm still taking Oklahoma, I think, by 3 touchdowns. So I think this 14-point spread is a little too generous to Cincinnati. Um, so you can go ahead and put that down as a lock on the week for
Oh
me.
baby,
Um, like put my $3 on that.
yeah, that's the confidence boost right there.
So, yeah, I think OU takes care of business pretty good. I think that Emory Jones is gonna go off. He's probably gonna have like a big run at some point. He's probably
Yeah,
gonna,
yeah.
he's
The
probably
the
gonna.
mobility is going to be a problem. The mobility is going to
Yeah,
be the problem.
I just don't see how the Cincinnati defense handles Dylan Gabriel at all. Like our wide receivers are looking so good. Kind of
Now,
going
Andrew
into week
Anthony
4
looks
here.
good. I don't know about the rest of them, but Andrew
Farouk
Anthony
looks
looks
good.
good.
I think Farouk looks good. He's had a
Yeah,
couple mistakes. I still think he
yeah,
looks really good.
yeah. You can't be
And
fumbling the
obviously
open
Stu.
kickoff this week. Don't be fumbling the
Yeah,
opening kickoff this week.
yeah. And then obviously
Yeah,
Stoops, he's
Stoops.
gonna be consistent no matter what.
Yeah,
So, I think they're just gonna have a field day on this Cincinnati secondary. And I think Dylan Gabriel's probably throwing for 4 or 5 touchdowns for
yeah.
sure.
I mean,
Um,
you
I
got
think he's in the whole game, if that makes sense,
yeah,
though. I
yeah.
think
He'll
he's
play
probably
his
in
first
until
four
maybe the
quarters.
last
Yeah,
drive.
his first
Yeah.
4 quarters. Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think this is probably the first full game that we see Dylan Gabriel. Um, I I still think you're going to see Jackson Arnold run that stupid fourth and short or third and
Yeah, I hate
short.
that.
I think you're going to see that. The big question for me is the running backs, right? Because right now
Yeah.
there's not really a running back that stands out here for the Sooners, right? Gavin
Tawee Walker a
Sawchuk.
little bit.
Yeah, I mean, but he has to. He's the guy that has been taking the most snaps because Sawchuk has not been healthy. And now I think this is the week where you're probably gonna see all four of these running backs. I think you're going to at some point
Mhm.
because I think that you still haven't had any differentiation between a lot of these guys and what their potential actually is. We haven't seen a lot of Javante Barnes. I mean, we haven't seen Gavin Sawchuk worth a damn. We've seen Walker a lot, which is great because he's been decent enough. He's good enough, right? He's good enough to do
Mhm.
what they're trying to do because
I
the
like him.
offensive line is decent. And we saw Hines a little bit. Um, but I mean, I think that right now, for what I'm expecting this game to be, I actually expect you to be sweating it out going into that final quarter. I think having a 10-point lead going into the fourth is something that you might have. I mean, I think that Cincinnati is going to, you know, be amped for this game more than any other game because this will be probably the only opportunity they're going to get to play you guys before you head off to the SEC, and I think that's why you're going to get everybody's best shot. And I think that that's why when you text me at halftime and it's tied or you're losing, you're going to be like, "What the hell is going on?" And I'm going to be like, "Don't worry, you're still going to win." But I think that this is going to be adversity time here for the Sooners. I think this is going to be. I think Emory Jones's mobility is going to cripple you a little bit defensively because I think even if your secondary, who's been playing relatively well this year, is shutting down the receivers, I think that his running ability, if he can, if they can cause Danny Stutzman to be having to cover a tight end instead of being there for run support, I think that's going to be the biggest thing, right? Because if you can have Stutzman spying the whole time, he's a tackle monster. He's gonna get Emory Jones to the ground. But if he's still getting
Yeah.
4 or 5 yards per scramble, even with Stutzman, tackling him, that's enough to move the chains any day of the week. So I think that if OU jumps on them early, like they need to. I think they need to go up 10-0 here to start this game at least, if not 14-0, to really kind of hammer the point home that they are for real. Um, Cincinnati needs to play as bad as they did last week, which it might be a tall ask. Because I still think that, as you said, I think this OU secondary will be a little bit exposed. I think that when you have a starting wide receiver that played at Florida, that's now transferring and looking good, and you look at Kiner, their running back, who's an LSU transfer, and he has more rushing yards than any of your running backs have right now to this point. He's averaging almost 100 yards a game and a touchdown. So I think that that's something that the defense is going to have to focus on. And again, like I said, this is a team that's put up more points than any other team that OU has faced. They put up 66 points against a bad team, but that's the most points any opponent that OU has faced has scored thus far against anybody this year. It may not mean anything to casual fans or even OU fans to point that out, but to me, what it screams is this offense can score. And I think they will score. And I don't think the OU fans should be like, "Oh my God," if they do score. But I think that if you have to trade touchdowns with this team, it's not going to look good for future games down the line.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think as long as OU comes out, with a quick 14, hopefully 21-0 lead in the first quarter, then I'll feel very comfortable thinking this is a team that I think is able to really do this thing. As long as they can show me that they can, no matter what, go into Cincinnati. get a bunch of touchdowns early and make sure we put this thing away early. I'll be really happy with that.
Yeah, I think that's what you're going to have to do because we saw last year you weren't a second half team last year. You lost a lot of first half leads in the second half last year. If you can prove that page has been turned with another year under Brent, another offseason under Brent, another year of this defense getting acclimated to his system, I think that's going to be one of the biggest takeaways from this game. If you can continue to put the pedal to the metal like you have against Tulsa and against, I wouldn't say SMU really per se because I mean you ran the ball like 2.5 times more than you threw it until it mattered. But I think that you're gonna have to win this game by 21 plus for me to sit back here and go and feel good about the prediction of them going to the national title game because I don't feel unhinged saying that they could go to the national title at this point, but they're gonna really have to play really well tomorrow, and we're gonna get a good look at it early. Another team that is in a national title discussion that's gonna get a look at early is Florida State. They play Clemson at the same time, and they're only a 2 point favorite against the Tigers on the road here. And again, I mean, should we be concerned considering how bad they looked against Boston College, or is this one of those teams where they play up to their competition and down to their competition when we talk about Florida State?
I think that might be the case, and I'm still taking Florida State in this game. What's the spread?
Two,
2? I
two.
would take Florida State. I'm taking Florida State to cover that 2-point spread. Like they're going to beat Clemson, I think, by at least a touchdown. I think this Clemson team is pretty bad, and I kind of gotta get out of here in a second, so I want to make my picks
Yeah,
as quick
go
as
ahead.
if I can. And I'll just make them, as we're kind of talking about these teams. But
Yeah.
I would pick Florida State right now. I would go ahead and take them as my. So I have $14. I've used three. I'll use another three on um, Florida State, and I'll put them as a lock of the week too because I think they covered this pretty easily. Um, so another couple teams we've been talking about, Tennessee. Who do they play? I saw it down here. Hold on, they play UTSA. And they're 23.5 point favorites against UTSA. I'm going to hammer Tennessee here because I think they're going to have a really nice, bounce back game after playing terribly against Florida. I think they're going to show UTSA why UTSA is not playing the same competition as Tennessee. So I think I'd take Tennessee to cover that spread real quick. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm gonna make this pick, and you're not gonna like it. I'm taking Iowa State, and I'm taking Iowa State minus
Oh,
3.5 against Oklahoma State. I'm doing it.
I like that
I'm
pick.
making that pick. I'm making that pick. You can put that down as one of my picks as well. I think I have one more here, or two more.
Two. Yeah, you got two more. So
Taking
I
Colorado. Not
oh
taking them to win, but I'm taking them to cover
cover the
21.
21. Okay. Okay. Okay.
The over under is 70 on this game. Wow.
Yeah, it's we got scoring happening with that one for
And then
sure.
why don't you talk about a game you want to talk about, and I'll give you my pick for that one.
Okay. Look, I mean, we'll talk about a couple of these. Another game everyone's looking at, UCLA and Utah. That game is at 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern. Utah's a 6 point favorite against the Bruins. They say Cam Rising could be back. This line has fluctuated due to Cam Rising's health. This was all the way up to 6. It dropped down to 4.5. It dropped all the way down to 3.5, and now it's back to 6. So that may mean that we could see Cam Rising for the first time this season. And that could be a good thing. That could be a bad thing. But UCLA is not looking too bad. Dante Moore, their quarterback, has been decent enough this year. I mean, UCLA hasn't lost a game either. So I mean, Chip Kelly's been doing an okay job with the Bruins. They look like they're going to be competitive this year, and I think that's a big takeaway there. Obviously, Ole Miss and Alabama happening at the same time. Alabama 6.5 point favorites against Ole Miss. This is at home in Tuscaloosa, but if Milroe doesn't play well, I think Jackson Dart and this team could possibly do this, and it might look easy for them to dispose of Alabama. But let's just take a step back here on Ole Miss. Here, they struggled with Tulane for about 3.5 quarters. This is not an indestructible Ole Miss team. Lane Kiffin's a good coach. We know his history with Nick Saban. We know how that goes normally for assistants and former disciples of the Godfather of college football. Kirby Smart's been the only one that's been able to really separate himself recently.
Sark
Sark. I mean, I guess this year you could say that as well.
gave him
Um,
two tough games, won one
yeah,
of them.
yeah. So I mean, I think that, and that speaks to Texas's recruiting prowess as well. They should be doing that. I think that's something that Sark has kind of brought back as far as the recruits being decent and playing up to their star level potential. Um, uh, we got a couple decent games. Kansas is favored by 9.5 over BYU. I mean, the Cougars look pretty good. Slovis has been pretty decent. BYU's kind of been a surprise. They beat Arkansas last week, which was one of my picks that didn't come through. I was kind of surprised how bad Arkansas looked against the Storm and Mormons, but this one's in Lawrence.
It's in Lawrence.
It's in Lawrence, so I mean, I like Kansas, but I just don't know how good they are. They haven't really played anybody this year, so I think this will be their first big test, and I'm excited to see how Jaden Daniels and company kind of operate.
Give me Kansas.
You like Kansas? Okay,
I want that pick. I want that pick. I want to
okay,
pick Kansas here. I think they cover. I think they win by 10, exactly 10. So this 9.5 point spread is just insane for me right now.
okay. I I like the confidence. I do like the confidence. Um,
Because it was either that or I was betting on Baylor to cover the 17 points against Texas.
yeah, so you've got your picks in here. You've got
Yeah,
Kansas minus the 9.5, Colorado plus the 21, OU minus 14, Florida State minus 2, and you picked Iowa State as well, which was at a 3.5 pointer. Where is that at? Find the Cyclones of Iowa State.
they were 3.5 against Oklahoma State.
Yeah, what time is that game?
Um,
Oh, there it is.
trying to find it.
Iowa State minus 3.5. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I think those are good picks for you. Let's see, Arkansas LSU. LSU 17.5 point favorites over the Pigs in Baton Rouge. I mean, spread seems big to me. I think Arkansas is good enough to hang with LSU, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to do that. I mean, 17 seems like a bit much here. What are your thoughts on that game, real quick?
Yeah, 17 seems like a bit much.
14 seems more. I mean, even 17 straight up. I mean, to have more than 17 is kind of wild to me.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Um,
But I still think like I don't know. Honestly, I might not touch this one.
that's what I'm saying. Like,
Like,
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I
like
mean,
just don't touch it.
yeah, just don't. Yeah, if I'm a betting man, don't touch it. Oregon State, Washington State, another ranked game. That one's at 7 Eastern, 6 Central. Um, Oregon State favored by a field goal on the road in Pullman. First kind of contest for either of these teams, really. Uh, I mean, this could go either way. Again, this is probably a game I wouldn't probably touch because I just don't
Yeah,
know enough because they haven't really played anybody. Um, uh, Baylor is 14.5 point dogs against Texas. Again, Shapen
are you on
should be
DraftKings?
back. Yeah.
I'm seeing 17. Oh,
Wait,
maybe it updated.
has it moved? I was actually looking at ESPN. Yeah, it's 17 on DraftKings. So that headline has moved from
Yeah,
14.5 to 17. So maybe Shapen isn't playing. Maybe that's what that's saying. I know he was a game time decision. Of course, another big game of the day: Ohio State, Notre Dame. Ohio State a 3 point favorite over the Irish. I like the Irish in this. I think that Sam Hartman solidifies his Heisman candidacy with a convincing win. I don't think this is going to be a close game. I think Notre Dame is going to come in there and win by double digits. It's a home game for them. They need to win this game at home by double digits for them to look like a monumental contender here. And Ohio State has not done anything in my books to look themselves into a spot where they deserve to be in the playoff as of right now. Their quarterback plays subpar. Their defense is okay. Marvin Harrison Jr. looks okay. But I think that your competition has not been great, and this is your first, contest. And Notre Dame's had a much tougher schedule, in my opinion. It hasn't been considerably tougher, but it's been tougher, in my opinion, than what Ohio State's had to go through. So I like Notre Dame here.
Yeah, I like Notre Dame here too, and I think they're gonna defend their home turf pretty well. And I think this is a battle in the trenches, obviously, and I think Notre Dame's O-line just comes out on top.
Another game that's happening at the same time. Number 24 Iowa playing Penn State. Penn State 14.5-point favorites. So it'll be whiteout conditions in Happy Valley. But you have a former Michigan quarterback in Cade McNamara going against Drew Allar and this offense of Penn State that struggled this last week against Illinois. I mean, I say that. I mean, but I think it's pretty obvious they did not look as impressive as they have against other teams this year. What are your thoughts on this 14.5-point spread? And is Iowa actually a team that can keep up some of this high scoring they've had thus far?
No. They are not. I don't think they're going to be able to do that, especially against Penn State's defense. I think Penn State wins this one by a lot. I think way
Okay.
more than 14.5. I'm thinking Penn State wins this by like
Oh,
28 points.
okay.
Like
I like
serious.
it.
I
I mean,
mean,
I have no,
like this Iowa offense. Let's talk about this Iowa offense. One, they've looked good, but they're still an Iowa offense. And they hit like 25 points like once. This Penn State defense is going to probably shut them out or lead them to like 6 points off field goals.
I mean,
Like
because
this
here's
team is
here's
going
the
to look
scoring
bad.
from Iowa thus far: 24-14 over Utah State, 20-13 over Iowa State, and then 41-10 last week. So like, yeah, they're averaging like 25 points a game. Yeah, I think they maybe score 10 points here. I think 10 points is
Yeah,
probably the max here. But I think that the defense for Iowa is good enough to hold this Penn State defense to, this over under is 40 on the dot. So 30-10 is not something I don't see happening. 30-10 could happen. I mean, you only scored 31 against Bowling Green. 30-10 sounds pretty likely to me. I mean, I kind
yeah,
of like 30-10. But I think that, Penn State could be up 27-0 at halftime. So I mean, you might just get a field goal in the second half, but I think that the spread is, or the over under is pretty accurate, with 40 being the round number here for these teams. Here's a pick I'm making right now, right in front of you. I'm picking Memphis to beat Missouri. This is a neutral site game. And I went out there earlier
neutral.
this year and said that Missouri was going to struggle with Memphis. Now Memphis had a very ugly win against Navy, where they couldn't hold on to the ball worth a damn. They're gonna have to fix that for sure if they're gonna be able to beat Missouri. They're gonna have to take care of the football. This is only a 6.5-point spread. Missouri's only favored by 6.5. Again, this is a neutral site in the Dome at America's Center. Over under is 51.5 here, and I like Memphis to win. Straight up, I think Memphis. In a neutral site takes care of a Missouri team that's probably still juiced over that Kansas
Yeah.
State win, and I think this is going to be a come down to earth moment for the Missouri faithful.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you guys can clip this and just wreck me if I'm wrong, because I mean I will deserve it. But the hate will
You can
continue.
clip this, Mizzou fans. You can clip this right now. You're finishing 4-8.
I
You're
mean,
finishing 4-8.
oh my goodness.
Clip it. Get
I mean,
ready.
no bowl
It's
game, no
happening.
bowl game for you.
And listen, with that, I gotta get out of here with that.
All right,
Um, so
we will bid
I'll
adieu
get out of here by
to
saying
Zach.
fuck Mizzou,
Yeah, that's right.
and
Fuck him.
and everyone have a fantastic Saturday. Make sure you have at least 7 beers before 11 a.m.
There you go.
kickoff. All right.
There you go, baby. Wise words
All right.
from Zach. We'll see you later,
Catch you
brother.
later.
All right, we will take it from here as we continue to give you episode 47, as Zach has plans tonight, so we kept him as long as we could keep him. But look, we have some other games to go over here, and I'm going to go over them real quickly with you guys and give you kind of my thoughts on where we're headed here this weekend. UCF and Kansas State's a game I'm interested in just because Kansas State has to rebound after this. They're only 3.5-point favorites. UCF has played very good football thus far. They've been one of the highest scoring teams in the country. You look at their schedule; it's not super tough. They beat Kent State 56-6. They squeaked by Boise State 18-16, and then romped Villanova 48-14. So I mean, if you're squeaking by Boise State, how good are you? It's hard to really gauge how good this UCF team is. They were supposed to be kind of one of the bottom dwellers of the Big 12 coming in this year. But I think overall, you're looking at a UCF team that could hang with Kansas State if they play as bad as they played against Missouri this last week. They have the offense to do that. We've seen them put up points against bad defenses, and is this Kansas State defense bad? I wouldn't say they're as bad as Kent State or Villanova, but I think that they did get a little bit exposed in the passing game against Missouri, and that's kind of what ended up losing them that football game. So if UCF can pass the ball effectively, expect them to have a decent game. They've got a good running back as well, RJ Harvey, who has a season of 39 carries, 239 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So again, you have a very balanced attack here coming from the Golden Knights of UCF. So that's a game I think will be as close as that spread is. I think 3.5 is probably an accurate spread because I don't think that Kansas State's going to be able to really separate themselves. If they do, it'll be later on in this game. I really like this as being one of the better games of the evening. USC travels on the road to Tempe, Arizona to take on Arizona State. Arizona State's going to trot out Drew Pine for this game. They have shelved their freshman quarterback due to injury. USC is a 34.5 point favorite here. And I'm just going to say, I just don't know if they cover this. Arizona State's not a great football team. I'm not going to sit here and say Arizona State is, world beaters or anything. I think USC probably wins this game by 28 or 30 or 31. I don't think they win by 5 touchdowns. I just don't know if they can do that because I don't think they're going to need to. I think this is a situation where you're looking at USC as probably coasting in the second half, and they might not need to even have Caleb Williams in the fourth quarter, and that may be why they don't hit the spread against the Sun Devils, who will be wearing their glow-in-the-dark jerseys on Saturday, and that is one of your later kickoffs of the evening. I think we've covered most of the exciting games for you. I guess I could revisit some of these, but I don't think I really need to. Most of the other games don't really have that many implications surrounding them. But I think that tomorrow is definitely going to be a game where you're going to be posted up. Well, I guess we could talk about Oklahoma State and Iowa State a little bit. He picked Iowa State to win this game. And I'll use this to transition into our next segment, and we'll find out who's drinking the Kool-Aid as we get into who's drinking the Kool-Aid. I think you'll be very surprised to see who's drinking the Kool-Aid. You might not be surprised about who's drinking the Kool-Aid, because who's drinking the Kool-Aid is the one and only Mike Gundy.
Drink the Kool-Aid. It ain't the end, baby, it's a new day. Future so bright, I bought some new shades. Toast that, bottoms up, drink the Kool-Aid.
Mike Gundy drinking the Kool-Aid. This is what he had to say after his performance of a 33-7 loss to South Alabama.
The minor problems, clearly, you get those worked out. Mm-hmm. The major problems, can they be fixed?
I don't think we have majors. I'm just being honest. I'm going to be able to give you a really good thought 3 weeks from now. Let me go back now. What we did out there Saturday was ugly. I'm not saying anything other than that, but I'm saying it's not. I don't see it as a major issue. I see it when I watched the tape. I felt a lot better than I did when I went home. Let's put it that way. I think everything that we're doing we can improve in enough to play and compete and give ourselves a chance to win games.
So I don't know what he's smoking. I'll be honest. I don't know what Mike Gundy is smoking, but Mike Gundy is drinking the Kool-Aid. I mean, look, you put up 7 points against a Sun Belt team. I'll just be frank with you. You put up 7 points against a Sun Belt team, which may be one of the most talented teams in the Sun Belt. But when you only put up 7 points and you play 3 quarterbacks and no one's able to get into a rhythm, your offensive line can't get a running game going to save their life, you're talking about a situation where, this has to be ringing alarm bells. This cannot be something that, as a head coach, you can take lightly. Sure, you beat Arizona State. Sure, you took care of business against, whoever they played in week 1. It was like California, Colorado, America. I don't know who they were playing, but it doesn't really matter, because these games are going to start to matter. And you're traveling to an environment that is yearning for a victory. Central Arkansas. Thank you, Leather. Central Arkansas. You're traveling to an environment that's not friendly. Matt Campbell is, I think, on the hot seat. You're on the hot seat. And I think that he needs this win. But OSU needs this win. You're talking about two teams that are probably at the bottom of the Big 12, along with West Virginia and Houston right now, as looking like the basement of what is currently the Big 12. And I don't think that that's exaggerating. I think that that's reality. Where they have major problems is everywhere. The defense can't stop anybody. The offense couldn't get past the 50-yard line. It was embarrassing. You were at home and you got embarrassed by a Sun Belt team by 26 points. That's not something that should happen. I get Mike Gundy is the best coach that Oklahoma State's ever had of all time. He's a Hall of Famer. He's fantastic. But he, in my opinion, has overstayed his welcome. He's gotten complacent. I think he has taken this Dabo Swinney approach of we don't need NIL to be good. And you've seen players like Trace Ford leave for Oklahoma. You've seen players leave for other schools. John Paul Richardson leaves to go play for TCU. I mean, these are players that last year made huge contributions, and now I'm having to sit here and talk about how, OSU is getting roasted at home by a Sun Belt team. Not just you lost in the last second, you got hosed. Time spot, thank you for those biddies. This is embarrassing. And if they don't win this game on Saturday, I think you're looking at a team that's definitely not making a bowl game, a team that's not going to be competitive, and a team that probably is still looking for a starting quarterback. And I think this is a game Iowa State needs to get back on track to try to get themselves out of that eighth spot out of 12, maybe get them to 7th. I mean, I think it's going to be big when it comes to bowl season and Iowa State making a bowl if they don't have some changes happen as well. But it's not going to be pretty football to watch. It's going to get ugly. And I think that whoever turns the ball over the least here and whoever's defense plays better wins this football game tomorrow. But that's my Gundy, and he is definitely drinking the Kool-Aid. So let's just get back here for you. Look, I mean, these are big time implications happening here. We already visited the sports book, so I won't really linger too long. I'll give you my picks here. I'm picking, as far as my picks go, I think I'm going to pick Iowa State minus the 3.5. I think that's one of my picks. I'm definitely taking, in my book, I think this is probably a win for sure. If you're wanting to try to make some money here, I'm picking. I mean, I'm looking at this now and I might be regretting this, but I'm picking Texas Tech minus 6 over West Virginia. I think they get the job done on the road in Morgantown. Texas Tech minus the 6 against West Virginia. Another game I'm picking right now is Maryland minus the 7.5 against Michigan State. I think they've been playing exceptionally well. I'm also taking Jacksonville State minus the 6.5 against Eastern Michigan at home. The Gamecocks have been playing really well. I'm a little biased this year considering I'm doing a rebuild with them on NCAA, so I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not being a little biased here, but I think that they do have a pretty good team. Another game I'm going with is I'm picking Notre Dame plus the 3. Notre Dame plus 3 against Ohio State. Lock that one in as my lock of the week. I'm locking that one in 110%. And give me North Carolina minus 7.5 over Pittsburgh on the road. I think the Tar Heels, who have kind of looked kind of hot and cold, get back on track against the Panthers as my last pick I have available for the St0ner Sports Book. My locks are going to be Notre Dame, like I said, and my other lock, I think, I hate to say that, it's Iowa State. Iowa State is my other lock. I think that they get the job done against a really bad Oklahoma State team, and I don't think it looks any better for them as the season goes on. So pray for your Cowboy fans as they're going to see a demise as this season goes in a downward trajectory for the Pokes. So that's going to wrap us up this week. Appreciate you all hanging out. This episode will be up on YouTube very shortly. Thank you guys for hanging out. This has been episode 47 of the St0ner Sports Radio podcast. Keep your stick on the ice and enjoy your day Saturday, and we will see you next week.